WarioWare Inc. was released for the Game Boy Advance in 2003 and delivered an endless barrage of gameplay ideas and visual styles, all condensed into 5-second bursts of joy. By stripping the idea of a game into its bare basics and wrapping it all in an inventive shell, WarioWare Inc. was innovative, clever, quirky, addictive, and just plain fun. Following its success, Nintendo commissioned a GameCube remake to be cranked out in just 6 months and released at a budget price.
Now, it is not uncommon for a home console game to be released on a handheld. Many classics of yesteryear have been re-released when portable technology catches up and we can play all our old favourites on the go. But what Nintendo have done here is to take a game designed ground up for a handheld and refashion it into a home console game, for a system several generations ahead in processing power. It's certainly an unconventional idea, but then again, unconventional is the calling card of the WarioWare series, and Mega Party Games certainly doesn't share to crank up the lunacy dial.
On booting up the game, you'll be treated to one of a selection of short videos that are just, well, unsettling. It's quite a welcome for the first time player. I've got to admit though, I love them. With cinematics that show plugs falling out, dots moving across the screen, and men running around a forest with paper cutouts, it shows a game embracing its cobbled togetherness and inviting you to play along. As you would expect from its Mega Party Games moniker, the game focuses heavily on the multiplayer experience, so I'll just speak briefly about the single player mode. All of the microgames are exactly the same as they were on the Game Boy Advance. And I do mean exactly. There's no upscaled graphics, no gameplay tweaks. It's more or less exactly what you'd see on a Game Boy player. And furthering this feeling is the game's generous offer of letting you hook up a Game Boy Advance with a link cable and using it as a controller. Or you can connect it to a Game Boy player and control it through a different GameCube, and use another link cable and control it with a Game Boy Advance again. Gee, I think those intro movies are getting to me. While the microgames are the same, the way they are presented is different, and surprisingly inferior to the original. No matter which collection of minigames you choose, this rather ugly elevator scene frames your game. What happened to all those clever intermissions from the GBA original? Another thing conspicuously absent are the plethora of additional minigames. There's none here. I have to assume that the developers deliberately neutered the presentation of this mode so that they wouldn't tread on the toes of the still new and similarly priced GBA title. The option to set the speed of a game for practice is a neat addition, but for owners of the original, the single player mode is bitterly disappointing, just like being served up a smaller portion on a dirty plate. Multiplayer though is a different story. The original had a couple of multiplayer games that gave each player one of the shoulder buttons, but these were purely a novelty. With 4 controller ports ready to go, Mega Party Games already has the advantage here. In almost every mode, players will pit themselves against one another by playing from the same 200 single-player microgames. The context in which these games are played, however, varies greatly, and every mode uses these games in a different way. Survival Fever is perhaps the most basic of these. Each player has 3 lives, represented by your crowd, and gets called on by the spotlight to play a microgame, either one at a time or all together. It's nothing too special, but the music and changing speed keep it engaging. As always, 9V brings along a treat for us die-hard Nintendo fans, this time with a mode based on the short-lived e-card system for the Game Boy Advance. Players draw cards representing microgames until they draw a bomb card. Then they have to play all the games on the stack to earn those cards. The players around the outside can also walk around the screen and steal cards from other stacks, and there's not much you can do to stop that. This mode is okay, but the randomness and stealing mechanics make it easy to tire of. But you've got to love a reference to an obscure Nintendo product. Milky Way Delirium brings some strategy to the party with an Othello-esque capture game. You beat microgames to shoot at your target space and try to surround your opponent's pieces. The most desirable squares take more games to beat, and if you don't beat every game, you set your opponent up for an easy space. This is an inventive use of microgames and a good thinking game. Highly recommended. Balloon Pop has a slightly different strategic bent. Basically, a game of hot potato. One player plays through games until they have a success, the others pump air into a large balloon. If the balloon pops while you're playing, you lose, and everyone else wins. Choosing when to go hard and when to hold back is a delicate decision, and the tension is palpable once the alarms start blaring. The knives start to come out when it's time to play Out of My Way, a mode where dirty is the only way to play. While one person plays, the other two must block the screen with their chosen characters, trying to make their opponent lose. It's a level of treachery unseen since the days of the Super Game Boy. Even the manual gets in on the act, telling you to pull out your friend's controllers and block the screen with your body. You want a game that encourages violent behaviour? It's hidden here behind a G8+ rating. It's also the only mode where character selection becomes kind of important, because it's much easier to block the screen when you're big dribble than when you're small Anna. But at least there's All for One to bring you back together again. It's the very antithesis of Out of My Way. One person plays in the dark, and the others must light important parts of the screen to help them win. It's great that the game offers a cooperative mode, and I love how the plot hinges on the original GBA not having a backfight. If the game wasn't off the wall enough, there's the Listen to the Doctor mode. This doctor gives the player a task to complete while beating a microgame, usually something humiliating. When you're done, your opponents will tap A to applaud your efforts. The player with the most applause after a few rounds will win. That's right, in this game, your opponents decide when to give you points. So the winner of this round depends as much on group dynamics as it does on your mooing skills. And it's absolutely ridiculous in a two-player game, as the most generous applauder will always lose. Aside from the irritatingly slow speed of the Doctor's speech, it's still a good mode for loosening up and having a laugh, especially if drinks are involved. For me, however, the star of the show is Wobbly Bobbly Turtles. I've taken Mega Party games along to a few parties, and this is a mode that always gets requested. And what this mode offers are a series of original, multiplayer microgames. From shoving your fingers in a rotating nose to evading nasal dribbles, these games are fun, competitive snippets which everyone can play together. Sadly though, these games just cry missed opportunity. There's only a few, and there's no way to select them individually. Instead, they are randomly drawn, and then wasted as a player select device for the real gist of this mode, playing those old microgames to stack turtles under your opponents so they lose their balance. Still, with a sharp presentation, newly vocalised song, and brief flashes of original microgames, this mode is a winner. Rounding things out are two multiplayer versions of minigames from WarioWare Inc, the compulsive Jump Forever and the twitchy racer Paper Plane, both good fun. There's also two modes where one controller gets passed around a group of up to 16. One, a tag team version of Jump Forever, and the other, a survival mode where you play as men in tights. Let's wind this up, shall we? For a game made under such tight constraints, WarioWare Inc. Mega Party Games does a good job of providing fun party gaming. It might be mostly a remake, but it has influenced future WarioWare titles, making a cameo appearance in WarioWare Touched, and clearly influencing the file system and multiplayer of Smooth Moves. However, this game gets easily overlooked in discussions of the GameCube, and it says a lot that this game doesn't even have its own Wikipedia article. In the end, Mega Party Games is best seen as a showcase for how brilliant a multiplayer WarioWare experience could be. It's a strong idea, weakened by a lack of original content. It just goes to show that recycling isn't always a good thing.